Who would have known that the Bat could only be challenged by a demon? Hello and welcome to the second chapter of The Bronze Bat, where we take a look at the history of Batman in the Bronze Age of comics. In the previous episode, we learned how Batman returned to be one of the best characters in comic books thanks to the combined talents of Neal Adams and Dennis O'Neil. The two of them were in charge of recreating the Batman of the Golden Age, that mysterious dark figure of the night who stalks the streets, hunting down criminals and meeting extraordinary enemies. This is what started the Bronze Age, and once the character was brought back, he needed new enemies. The team working in Batman were reluctant to use the characters like the Joker, Riddler or Catwoman because those were the villains of the campy days of the Silver Age. The new Batman needed new villains, and so Man-Bat was created. The story of a man turned into a monster was a success, and the creative team started thinking of new enemies, more serious and dark, just like the new old Batman. Soon after Man-Bat, Dennis O'Neil introduced the mysterious group called the League of Assassins, and that is where we continue the history of Batman. The Dark Knight had confronted the League of Assassins a couple of times, and he also faced their leader, Dr. Dark. However, he couldn't stop them until now. One night, at the top of the Statue of Liberty, Batman was informed about the activities of Dr. Dark, but his informant was killed by members of the League of Assassins. Using this information, Batman tracked Dark to Asia, where he was ambushed by the League and locked in a cellar along with a woman called Talia. Talia was kidnapped by Dark, and she explained that Dark and her father had a falling out, which is why Dark wanted revenge. Batman and Talia worked together to bring down Dark, and during the final confrontation, Dark was shot and killed by Talia. And yes, this was the very first appearance of Talia, and also, this story was later adapted in the episode Off Balance from Batman the Animated Series. A short time passed since the first encounter with Talia, and suddenly Robin was apparently kidnapped. Now, just in case you don't remember, Robin moved out of Wayne Manor and was studying at the Hudson University. Ever since the start of the Bronze Age, Robin was featured in his own short stories in Batman and Detective Comics, but most of that time his activities were irrelevant. That is, until now. While working in the Batcave in order to find Robin, Batman is shocked to meet the father of Talia, Ra's al Ghul, who somehow managed to get into the Batcave and knows Batman's secret identity as Bruce Wayne. Rage tells Batman that Talia was kidnapped as well, and they start working together to find Talia and Robin. Batman goes along in the journey around the world, where he is forced to fight against thugs and a leopard in Calcutta. After this, Ra's al Ghul and Batman go to the Himalayas, where they expect to end their journey. While climbing the mountains, Rage was attacked, and Batman continued his journey alone. When he finally locates Robin, they are attacked by the Brotherhood of the Demon, but Batman has deduced that everything was just part of a plan created by none other than Ra's al Ghul. Rage tells Batman that indeed it was all part of a test to learn if Batman was a worthy successor. Batman doesn't understand, and Rage finally tells Batman that his daughter, Talia, is in love with Batman and that he is willing to let them marry and become his successor. And this story was also beautifully adapted in Batman the Animated Series in the episode The Demon's Quest Part 1. Now, I bet that you're really confused because I have been saying Rage and Raz. I'm simply doing this to demonstrate that there is no right way to say it. The name has been used so inconsistently across the media that at this point it doesn't matter. And since Julius Schwartz is not here anymore to ask him what the name is, it doesn't really matter. So call it whatever you want. I'm gonna call him the best Batman villain. Ra's al Ghul was introduced in 1971, not long after Man-Bat. The Batman editor Julius Schwartz was convinced that Batman didn't have an arch-enemy. He considered that the Joker was just a clown, not the Batman's nemesis, and so he wanted to create the ultimate enemy for Batman. This was not the first time that Schwartz tried this, because in the Silver Age he came up with the Outsider, and if you want to know why this character failed, check out the Silver Bat. Now, many years later, Schwartz was ready to give it another try, and he first came up with the name Ra's al Ghul, which means the demon head, or so he believed. Schwartz then told the best Batman writer, Dennis O'Neil, to develop this character, and the artist for that story was Neal Adams. O'Neil made Ra's a powerful man and the leader of a worldwide secret organization, and Neal Adams is responsible for the look of such an iconic character. Once the comic book reached the Batman fans, Schwartz knew that he had hit the jackpot, and that they finally had created the Batman's arch-nemesis. After this big event, another tremendous thing happened. The classic Golden Age villain, Two-Face, was brought back in Batman 232. Almost 17 years after his last appearance. Two-Face went missing even before the Silver Age started because the writers didn't know how to properly use him. But now that the stories in Batman were dark and the enemies were smart, Two-Face returned. And what a comeback he made! And everything that has happened until now was made possible by the amazing team of Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. The two of them truly are some of the most important people in the history of Batman. After Two-Face's iconic return, Batman confronted Man-Bat again because Kirk Langstrom had a relapse and transformed into the Man-Monster again. And there was also the time when Batman fought the Creeper, who was being manipulated by a scientist. The Man-Bat story was quite interesting because Frank Robbins, the writer who created Man-Bat, also did the art of this story. Robbins was also an illustrator, but his art was very strange and very unusual for a comic book. It only worked because the story was dark and strange, and the art style matched the feeling of the story. As for the Creeper, well, all you need to know is that this character was created by Steve Ditko, who was also responsible for co-creating Spider-Man with Stan Lee. And speaking of team-ups, Batman was doing the same old stories with Superman in World's Finest, but at the end of the previous year, Julius Schwartz became editor of that comic and decided to remove Batman. World's Finest became a Superman team-up book, in which the Man of Steel teamed up with other heroes of the DC universe. In other words, World's Finest became for Superman what Brave and the Bold was for Batman, as the Dark Knight was also teaming up with all the popular heroes back then. Now, besides all these things, nothing much happened in this year, and the only relevant and interesting stories are the ones involving Ra's al Ghul and Talia. On his second appearance, Rage and Batman worked together to stop a scientist from spreading a deadly plague. Of course, Batman wouldn't have succeeded if Talia had not arrived in the last minute to assist the Dark Knight. Their relationship was still in development, but many fans didn't like the idea of Batman being romantically involved with a potential criminal. Sometime after this, Batman started investigating the case about a murdered scientist who had his brain removed, and once again he was joined by Talia. However, during the investigation, Talia made a mistake that prevented them from learning the truth behind the crime, and Batman started to suspect Talia's true intentions. When Batman investigated Talia, he discovered that what she did was no mistake, and so he started following her until he discovered Rage's secret underwater hideout. In this place, Batman learned that Rage was responsible for the murder of the scientist and finally realized that Ra's al Ghul was an evil criminal mastermind. This was the beginning of their long-time rivalry and also the strange relationship between Batman and Talia, a relationship based in lies and passion. And finally, this year ends with a bang, but not for Batman. We haven't mentioned Batgirl in this whole time, and that is because, just as Robin, her solo stories were not that relevant since the ending of the Silver Age. But at the very end of this year, she made a bold decision that changed her life. Barbara had been working as Batgirl for almost 2 years, but she became disappointed when a criminal she had captured on her early days was released from prison and she was forced to stop him again. Knowing that the reforming system was broken, Barbara learned the hard way that being Batgirl was not useful enough. In the meantime, her father, Commissioner Gordon, was offered a chance to run for Congress, but he never liked the idea. Knowing this, Barbara volunteered to replace her father and she revealed her identity as Batgirl to him. Gordon, being an expert detective, had already deduced the truth months earlier, but he was glad that she finally shared the secret with him. And this is how Barbara Gordon became a politician, to change the system from inside. Bet you didn't know that one. Anyway, that does it for this short year of the Bronze Bat. Make sure to come back next week when we continue the history of Batman with more stories about Rage or Ra's al Ghul.